everyone's here, so I'll get started. I think that today, for the workshop C1 and C2, it's a waste of time if I just go through the methodology and objectives for you guys, because honestly, I could just email that out for you guys and you can just read it, right? So one of the nice things is I have taught this class before. It's been a while since I've actually taught one. It's been a while since I taught, but I have taught C1 and C2 high, so I think the best thing for today's session would be for you guys to ask a lot of questions. Since rather than just giving you guys like the objectives and methodology and how to teach it, I can give you more practical advice on like what kind of problems you might encounter while you're teaching the class. So I think that's a lot more valuable than just me just reading off the slides for you guys. So definitely ask a lot of questions. Since we have such a small group, I don't mind if you guys interrupt me throughout the workshop and just ask a lot of questions about like if you could do it this way, or if you could do it this way, what kind of problems you might have, or what you can do in this instance, things like that. Alright, so get started. So I'm just going to go over the objective of the entire program, and then objectives of each component. And then I'll go over the class structure very briefly with you guys, and then I'll go over each component and why we do certain things in certain ways. So first of all, let me go over the program objective for C1 high. So have you guys all taught C1 and C2 mid? Who hasn't taught Par and Birdie C1? Okay, a good number of you guys. Alright, so let me go over C1 and C2 mid a little bit first before I actually dive into this thing. I'm not going to go over it in detail, but basically C1 and C2 mid, the basic formula is you do some kind of a warm-up activity where you kind of get to know the topic with the students. It's called Topic Connect, I believe. And then you go into the reading section, and then you do a little quiz on that, and then discuss it a little bit. And then you do the listening section, do a little quiz on that, discuss it a little bit, and then you do a little bit of reading or writing at the end of the class. That's it. You do that for 13 weeks. So basically, have you guys all taught, has anyone taught Cheongdam 2.0 in here before? Okay, good number of you guys. If you haven't, it's okay. So in 2.0, you guys know that there's a lot of skills, actually more than C1, C2 mid. So things like how to find main idea, how to find like implied main ideas, maybe how to like logical fallacies, especially in like Birdie class. There's none of that in C1 and C2 mid. It's just basically how to find the thesis statement, main idea, major details in both reading and listening classes, and how they connect to each other. So how those things are related and how they're connected. That's all they do in C1, C2 mid. So there's no high-level skills in C1 and C2 mid. So that's reserved for C1 high. Are you guys teaching C1, C2 mid next term? Maybe. You guys will find out, I guess, in 2 weeks. But C1 high, it's basically C1, C2 mid, except with a little bit more skills in the class, and also the reading and listening passages are, of course, a little bit more difficult. So if you guys take a look here, C1 is high, is to acquire critical thinking, language skills, and topic knowledge. I think that this is definitely the focus of the class here, language skills, and these two are a little bit more minor, but still good. So, of course, critical thinking, whenever you guys get answers from students, you always want to ask why, and hopefully like bounce it off to other students as well, if they agree or disagree with the person that just answered. And topic knowledge, this is also a minor objective, but also when we're going through the passages and listening passages and reading passages, it is based off of curriculum from like top countries in education, and then topics that we pull from those countries as well, so that we can make them more knowledgeable based on different topics. That's about it. So language skills is the main focus for C1 high. Pretty simple. Alright, moving on. I'm going to just go through this very briefly because we are going to go over this in depth a lot more as we go on throughout this workshop. So the first hour, someone has taught C1, C2 mid in here, right? No? Okay, so only one person. So if you guys take a look here, this is actually C1, C2 mid. For 3 hours, you usually do this. for C1 High, there's an extra hour added just for skills. So I remember like 9 months ago we did this workshop as well, when it was like brand new, no one had taught it before, and everyone was freaking out because we all taught C1, C2 mid, and then it was done in 3 hours, and in those 3 hours people had a hard time finishing all the material. And then we added this extra 1 hour critical skills, and everyone was like, oh my gosh, how do we do like 3 hours when you added another hour worth of skills? So time management is going to be very, very important in this class. And also the reason why we usually don't put new instructors in these high classes is because of those time management issues. And you guys really have to, I guess, use your best judgment on what you cover and what you don't cover. That's very, very important. So I think one of the best things about this class is you don't run out of materials. So it's always better to have more things than run out of materials and have nothing to teach, right? So don't feel pressured to cover every single question and every single paragraph in this module. That's not the most important thing, right? Just remember what the objectives are, and when you prep, think about what you want to cover and what you don't want to cover. So don't feel pressured to cover everything. That's very, very, very important to you. So the first hour you're going to just cover skills, so things like implementing ideas from like 2.0, logical fallacies, tone, purpose questions, things like that. So, and then the second hour you'll cover the reading, and then the last hour you'll cover listening, and then speaking or reading. Any questions up to this point?
Well, so the reading, it's a lot shorter because there's less discussion then?
Because
I know for the midnight discussion was like 40 minutes.
So there's discussion here, but the focus shouldn't be discussion, but you will have to discuss. Anyone know why?
Comprehension?
Yeah, comprehension one. But it's like a more simple reason than that. Think about like we were teaching.
It just takes longer to read?
Yes, it does. But you're teaching kids, right? So think about this. You just went through an hour of skills, and then you're reading like New York Times articles with the kids. Like they're gonna be drained. They're gonna be like out of it. You're gonna lose focus with the kids. So like discussion is very important here to kind of get them back on track or get them more interested in what you're actually reading. Because if you don't do that, then the kids are just like not paying attention. So again, like I said before, there's no like discussion element here, but it's a good idea to prep like media cards on the side of the reading passages to discuss with the students, so you keep their attention as much as possible. Always try to contextualize with the students. So what that means is like make the material, however irrelevant it may seem to the students' lives, try to make it relevant somehow by giving them context on why this is important. That's very important. Any other questions? Yeah.
So when we prep, obviously there are things we're going to have to cover for every class,
Yes.
but as far as making sure we pick and choose, like you just mean as far as like question, answer, justification.
Yes, so one thing you'll see in this first hour is there's a lot of questions that you can go through. There's maybe like 60, 70 questions. Of course, you're not going to go through all of them.
Right.
So they're divided into little sections. So basically, like let's say that there's 10 questions in each section. You don't want to go over every single question in every single section. Let's say that there's 10 questions, but you see that your students are getting these questions very quickly. It's really easy for them. Then you can just move on to the next section. So something like that. So the first day is going to be a little bit tough because it's going to be kind of feeling how your students are and what their level is. But by the second, third class, you can kind of prepare a little bit better. Maybe think about which areas the students are going to struggle with a little bit more. Good questions. Any other questions? Okay. So before I actually move on to the actual textbook and components, you guys can actually write this down. So if you want to look at any of the winter books, you can use this ID. I don't know if you guys saw this, but it's CDI3 _ INS21. And the password is CDI30666.
Is this guest login only available for like a certain frame of time?
No.
Oh, it's always available?
Yeah, they might take it down like sometime in the middle of the term.
Yeah.
But there'll be like a new ID. So if you guys go on like for the team leaders here on portal, or if you guys go on like Google Community, usually it's like posted which ID you can use, or you can ask on the Google Plus community, and we'll answer for you.
It's usually the same, just with a different number.
Yeah. So I don't know why they just don't use one number all the time, but yeah, they usually, it might be changed. I know last term it was like 7, like INS 7, but this term they decided to use. Yeah, we always use different numbers, but this time it's 21. Who knows who does that? But anyways, if you guys go into this ID, you can go in and take a look at all the winter books. So every single winter textbook is in here. This isn't C1 or C2 related actually, but if you want to look at someone like the other books, not very good at touching this, but anyways, I'm not gonna try. But there's like, there's textbooks over here, and there's also semi-books, right? So inside the semi-books, you'll see like the master's books if you want to take a look at B1 master or C2 master. They're pretty cool. Oh, that's right, it's not called master. It is called master.
Yeah.
But B1 master is called like L101 now, just in case for the future. And C2 master, so I guess that's kind of like C2. C2 master is called P101.
Are those frequent classes now?
Yeah, those are 3.0 classes. Okay, but anyways, this is how you get into, if you want to take a look at next term's classes like C1, C2 high, here it is. All right, so here's C1 Eagle. We'll just take a look at this one. Alright, so we're going to start with the critical skills. So the objective of the first hour of critical skills is to introduce and practice the critical skill of the week. Very simple. So as long as your students understand the skill, and then they practice it and get a good feel for how to apply it, then you've done your job for this session. There's always going to be 2 skills every single week. Just keep that in mind. Okay, so if you know that there's going to be 2 skills every single week, then you can prepare your class right, to fit that time. So let's go through the textbook a little bit. You'll see in the first page, right, so this is the very first skill. There's always 2 skills. The first skill is going to be identifying purpose, and then the second skill is going to be identifying tone. Right? Remember, have you guys taught Eagle? Has anyone taught 2.0 Eagle before? Okay, some of you guys, it's okay if you haven't, but basically, don't try to read every single line in Eagle class. There's so much content, right? What you're trying to do is the students should be at a level where they can actually pick up on what the main ideas or main point is really quickly. So go through and I would just say like, okay, what do you think we need to know from here? And just underline like 2 sentences that you think like will be very important here. Right? You don't have to cover every single sentence. So when you're preparing, you should just be preparing just the main points here, not every single one. So just have the students understand, right? And honestly, a lot of these, it's not too important, right? So if you feel like something's not very important here, you can skip over it, it's fine. Yeah, this part isn't too important. So after like the intro of the 2 skills for the day, you'll see this prime part over here. So what you're trying to do is introduce and explain this skill, so identifying purpose, and then have students confront the questions. Different locations do this in different ways. So if you look here, it's like you're supposed to do it like this. You're supposed to say, okay, so here's an identifying purpose question. I'm going to give you like 2 minutes. Go. You're not supposed to like give them any hints or any kind of guidance or anything. And this is supposed to be for, kind of seeing where they are, like how good they are. Right? So if you know every single student gets this question right, you can just breeze over all the practice questions here. Honestly, on the first day, I don't like doing it this way because it's kind of like if you're teaching someone how to ride a bike and you're just like, hey, get on this bike, let's see how you do. It's kind of, some people might think it's a little mean, some people might think it's effective. That's definitely up to your teaching style. Right? If you feel like this is going to give you a good picture of how your students are doing, that's fine. I know a lot of you guys that taught 2.0, we didn't do it like this in 2.0. We taught them the skill, and then you practiced it, and then they got to do it on their own. Right? But it's a little bit different in 3.0. I would recommend doing this section a little bit later on in the term when you guys get more comfortable with the students, especially because they might feel like you don't care too much if you kind of just let them do it on their own a lot of the time. So you'll see. Actually, we can try this one together.
I have a question. Is it effective to just let them, hey, try this and then see where you are? Like, does that work on average for most people?
Officially, it is effective.
Okay.
For me, I honestly I didn't like doing it that way. Maybe because I taught 2.0 for so long that I wasn't used to it, but I did do it from time to time, especially on the easier ones. But some of these skills, as you go on, like week 6, 7, 8, 9, they become really, really tough. Actually, even for instructors, they become pretty tough. So at that point, sometimes I don't do this prime part. So just use your best judgment. And the reason why I say that you can sometimes skip over this prime part, is because you're going to see this exact same question again 2 more slides later. So, I mean, let's take a look at this one. If you look at this, identifying the purpose, if you guys just take a look, like just for like 10 seconds, do you guys know what the 3 different purposes of writing anything is? Entertain, inform, or persuade, right? So if you guys just glance at this, what do you guys think this one is? So this would be a very good exercise then, right? So this one is actually persuade. Any guess? Well, look who wrote it.
World Tours.
It's a tour company that's trying to write this, right? So this is like, this would be for you guys, since you guys are adults and I may be teaching you guys this, then I would definitely do this section, right? Because I know you guys have like a base understanding of like the purpose, right? To see where you guys are. And then, so now you guys kind of got an understanding why you might want to do it. Okay, so now that you know like where they are, okay. So the majority of maybe students got it right or got it wrong, then you actually dive in and teach them, right? How do you identify the purpose? So again, here it's very, very important to prep which sentences you want to underline and which sections like the students should know, right? So like entertain, inform, persuade, those things that you guys just told me. Students should definitely underline those or box or circle those, right? I think parents really hate it when students' textbooks are blank, so make sure there's like a lot of colors, underlining boxes as much as possible. Do that. Regardless of if it means anything or not, they just love stuff. So after you've underlined important things here, right, circle things, make sure they understand it, maybe give some examples. Examples are always good. Then you're actually going to go through and look at this again. Right? Except here they kind of break down exactly what to look for. Right? The first clue is in the title. Right? So if you push this, it tells you like heaven on earth. Right? This word heaven gives you a clue that it's probably going to be persuasive. Otherwise, it would just be the great place. Second clue. Source of the information, right? It's a tour company. And then the last one, maybe special word, special place. American imagination. So words like that are going to give them hints. So like I said, you're going to do this again and break it down with them anyway. So some instructors don't like doing it at the beginning, and they just like jumping straight into this. Right after they explain the skill. Any questions? So again, this is why it's we don't usually throw new instructors into these classes. It's because instead of like C1, C2 is very cookie cutter. You just follow the program. But this, you have to use your judgment. And I guess like at this point, your team leader or FM or BM, whoever schedules, trusts you enough to make those judgment calls to teach these classes. Right. So moving on. Now you're going to practice, right? If you look, there's a lot of practice questions. There's a ton. It goes to page 18. So there's a ton. But if you look here, it's not tough. So what you're supposed to do here is like for each title, predict whether you think it's going to be informative, persuasive, or both. It's not very time consuming, right? 101 reasons why math is unimportant, right? Journey to the Arctic. Pollution, not someone else's problem. These are very, very quick questions. Right? So of course using the SRS is advisable, so you get the answers from all the students and have them participate, but sometimes you can just have them raise your hands. It's totally up to you. Again, so there's like, I think there's like 7 or 8 questions, 6 questions on each page. So if you see that they're getting it each time, right, just move on. You don't have to do every single question. But if you feel like the students are struggling, then that's when you go through more questions, right? One of the things with these types of classes for instructors is that you have to prep a lot, but that doesn't mean you're going to use all your prep. So if you guys have taught IBT before, you have to plan for every single wrong answer, but that doesn't mean you're going to explain every single wrong answer, right? Same thing here. You do want to have every single one prepped, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But that doesn't mean that you're going to use all 6. You might just use 2. And it sucks because you prepped it, but that doesn't mean you have to use it. And I see a lot of instructors do this sometimes because they feel like, oh, I prepped it, so I'm going to teach it no matter what. And you don't want to have that kind of mentality. Just definitely be flexible, but be prepared. So you're just going to go over all these purpose questions, right? There's a ton. And there's some audio ones. And then, like I said, after you identify purpose, you're going to identify the tone. Alright, so like I said, there's always 2 skills, right? So the first one was purpose. The second one here is identifying the tone. Tone is definitely a lot harder for students, right? Positive, negative, or neutral, but then there's also like arrogant tone or neutral tone, right? So there's a lot of different words that they can choose. So this one is definitely a lot harder for students. So if I was teaching this class and I had an hour to cover both of these, I would definitely leave a lot more time for tone rather than purpose. So that's the way you prep for this class. So let's take a look. Tone, same thing. When you're teaching them, right, how to identify the tone, you definitely want to look through this paragraph and then underline things that are very important and things that they should know. Okay? And there's no immediate parts here. Maybe there will be later, but I would prepare your own examples. Okay? Very, very important. If you kind of skim through this section and don't teach them the skill correctly, then it becomes a lot harder later. Right? So make sure you have examples that the students can relate to. Right? Like for instance, if you're talking about tone, I would prepare something about talking about their parents. Maybe like if they get a bad test score in class, and then maybe kind of emulate how their parents would react. Right? You know, and then they would understand. Oh, okay, I know that kind of tone my parents use. That means that they're. So, yeah. Also try to inject a little bit of humor here, right? Because, you know, if you're doing skills for an hour, this is like one of the few places where you can actually kind of use fun examples to kind of get them hooked so that you can keep moving on throughout this. It's pretty tough. Any questions? Okay. So same thing, after you teach them how to identify tone, you're just going to go through the practice questions. Oh, they're going to teach you how to do this again. Practice questions. More practice questions. As you can see, sometimes they don't all look the same, right? But this is still a practice question. And some of them take more time than others. So like, especially these, like, where you have to actually write in something, I usually just do 1 or 2. And if they have a hard time, then I just do it thoroughly. So that's the first hour. Questions on the first hour? Alright, so it's pretty straightforward. You should definitely finish the skills in the first hour, within the first hour, right? If you can finish it like maybe 10 minutes before and finish this part before you go on break, that would be ideal. For me, after teaching this class, I think if you finish this section and then go on break, usually the timing is perfect. Depends on the actual skill for the day though, sometimes it goes on. Sure.
Oh, so the high levels don't have a collaborate section, huh?
Collaborate section is...
Because in the C1, C2, they always had collaborate and micro project. They don't
Oh,
have
at the end. No, they don't have that. This is where they do like the little drawings. or
Yeah, with the
something.
really easy.
Yeah, they don't have those. So that's why, again, it's very, very important to put in, like, especially like during those parts where you explain the skills, or especially here, it's very important to get the kids like more interested. Because if you fail to do that here, then now you got an hour of reading and they're going to be really bored. So in this, after you come back from break time, or if you've done this before break, this is like the connect section, C1, C2 mid, where you try to get them interested about the topic for the day. So the objective here is to make sure you get the students' interest. Very, very important. So that means lots of media cards, prepare things that students can relate to, right? This is a very, very easy topic for students to relate to. And one of the nice things about C1 High compared to in the past when we had like Eagle, Alba, Allo Plus reading books, if you've taught them before, the topics were horrible, right? So there were things like the Viet Cong, Supreme Court, Indian Wars, like Civil Wars,
slavery.
exactly. So things that I don't care about, things that the students don't care about, right? They don't care about the American government. It's just horrible. But topics like this, it's a lot easier to get the students interested, right? Advertising, very, very easy. So definitely students love drawing, you guys know that, so maybe you can tell them to draw something or have a drawing quiz ready. This one's already made up for you, like draw a picture of an advertisement you've seen, right? Get them to relax just for a little bit, right, to get them interested in the topic, right? So you can have them like draw something that they've seen.
That's a good Nike swoosh.
Alright, anyway, so you just go through, right, make sure they understand these words. The topic is advertising strategy, right? Why do we do it? Brand recognition and consumer consumption. So make sure they understand what the words are. And then there's some questions for you. Again, you don't have to use these questions. You can prepare your own, that's fine, right? Never, never feel forced to use this content, right? But always meet the objective. That's what's important, okay? So don't worry about this too much, but this is very important. And I would probably recommend you guys have like a video ready. I think there will be media cards for you here, right? To talk about advertising and advertising companies. So even though this section doesn't look like much, it's very, very, very important to keep the students' interest. So moving on. I'm going to start the reading. Okay, so this is called the annotate section here, which is the reading. And in the reading section, you're trying to definitely annotate all these paragraphs, and usually it's pretty long. I think they actually shortened it compared to past terms. Yeah, a little bit, but it's still pretty long. So you're supposed to annotate and then gain some information about the topic, but again, the main focus of C1 is to see how different things are logically connected, right? How the paragraphs are connected to each other, how the paragraphs are connected to the thesis statement, things like that. So try to connect different things with other things, right? Go back to things that you talked about before. So a lot of these articles or essays are from pretty tough sources. Like this one is from the New York Times, right? So I'm sure like maybe a lot of you guys, I don't know how many of you guys read the New York Times here, but if you do read it, it's pretty tough, right? It's like pretty much one of the top like top newspapers, right? It's like, if you work for the New York Times, you're probably on top of the journalism world, right? So it's pretty prestigious. So that means that the content is going to be pretty tough as well. It is a little bit dumbed down, a little bit, but it's still pretty tough, right? So if you look here, there's 13 paragraphs. It used to be like 20 something, but it's not too bad. It seems like a lot, but it's actually not too bad. The first week might be kind of tough, but as you get faster, it's not too bad. So what you're supposed to do is, again, allow the students to just confront the passage and say, okay, I want you guys to just annotate, go. But I would highly recommend that you don't do that the very first week. Okay? So kind of guide them through the passage the first week so they know what to expect and what to expect, they know what your expectations are. First week. And honestly, you're just supposed to have the students annotate the main point in each paragraph. That means one sentence for each paragraph is usually enough. I'm not going to say all the time, but usually one sentence for each paragraph is usually enough. So that means they're just going to, like if you look at the paragraphs, they're mostly 4 sentences long. Right there. 4, I think this one's like 5, but they're around 4 sentences long. And they're trying to just choose the one sentence that's the most important in each. So as the term goes on, it gets really, really quick. But the very first week, first couple of weeks, it's going to be tough. So I would recommend preparing media cards that ask a question that leads them to the answer in each paragraph. That helps a lot. Oh, they're supposed to answer over here as well. I actually just got them underlined, but some instructors actually have them write down in summarized format, the important part here. I think that's actually really good, but if you're pressed for time, you might not have time to do that. So it's up to you.
How long do you spend on this section typically?
It's supposed to be this section and this section is supposed to be 40 minutes. Yeah, together. I spend about 15. It's been like a year since I taught this, but 15 to maybe like 20 minutes on this section. 15 would be ideal.
So you have it. So about half the time goes into the discussion.
Yeah, about 20 minutes, I would say.
Scott, doesn't it annotate, scan, and discuss this 20 minutes?
Yeah, yeah. So like I would spend half the time here and then half the time for scan.
So when they're annotating, it says have the students confront. Is that the same where you shouldn't be helping too much?
Yeah. So it's supposed to be like that.
Okay.
But the very first weeks, I would agree.
Because I know at like this level, because like the topics are so abstract, the students will ask like nitpicky questions,
Yeah.
and you should just ignore them. Well,
No,
not saying
no.
ignore them, but then like you shouldn't address like every question, like every proper noun that they don't know.
Yeah. So again, that's up to you. Remember, if they ask those questions, I don't think you should necessarily ignore them, but say
I'll talk to you after class.
no. Like, what kind of question, if you look at paragraph 2, what
Teacher,
kind of
what is
question do you think?
CPS?
Yeah, things like that. So those things, I think you can do very quickly. I would still answer them. Okay? It's an insurance company. CBS is a TV station. It takes like 1 second. But if it gets too in-depth, then I would say, I'll tell you after break time or something, or during break time. But usually if they ask simple questions, I would still answer them. Again, like that's totally up to you. That's not for me to say. That's like dependent on your class and your students. If you know that they're just doing it to bust your balls and they're just gonna try to waste time, which happens a lot, right? Then just move on. But if the students are really genuinely curious, I'll definitely answer for them. And if you have a good discussion going on.
You need to review the passage before they start the questions.
What do you mean? Oh, you mean like?
The scan
The reading
questions.
the question.
I would definitely go over what the topic is and what they can expect to find, but not in detail. That's supposed to be how you cover it, but you can go over it like with a lot of guidance, like, depending on the class. If you have a class where they can do this very easily on their own, then yeah, just look and go and do it on their own. If the students need a lot of guidance, sometimes you do need to prepare questions and video cards beforehand so that they can get the answers a little bit easier. So So like for this one, I think this first sentence is very important, right? Advertisers seem determined to fill every last one of them. So a question you could say is, what do advertisers try to do? And then they can answer this question.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So let's say this is week 1, day 1, and the kids are doing this. They're supposed to annotate. We can guide them, and then after that they have questions to answer, right? And then after the questions, doesn't it go back to the reading and you kind of like explain more what?
You don't explain more. You actually
Just show them.
yeah.
Show, don't tell, right?
You're supposed to like discuss the section with them. Like if you look at these questions, they're more like, how does the author grab the reader's attention in the first 2 paragraphs? It's more like deep comprehension questions. So like these 3 sections, you have 40 minutes to cover it all. It's gonna be tough for the first 2 weeks.
So this part is just like essentially the quiz part, if you're teaching in 2.0?
Yes. And also like what I think I found helps a lot is actually doing when I prep, like looking at the answers first and then going back to see what the students will need to know. Doing it that way was really helpful.
Can we allow them to like dual screen it and then have them on the scanning page and then like combine the time so that they can answer the questions while they annotate?
She could, but the focus here is supposed to be like, I think that kind of detracts from trying to find the logical connection between the paragraphs. Because I think if you do it that way, the students will be too focused on trying to just answer the questions and not care about the passage itself. I mean, so if you have like awesome students that are gonna take a look at the essay in depth and answer the questions at the same time, then that's fine. But I think that would be a very rare class. If you give the kids like time to do the questions, they won't care about the passage. So don't worry if you don't get through every single paragraph. Maybe you'll get through like 8 or 9. So after that, this is the same as C1, C2 mid. You just go through the scanning questions. So this is definitely independent. So you give your students like, I would say like 10 minutes to go through these paragraphs, or to these questions. And then afterwards, you just see, remember, don't go over the questions that a lot of students got correct, right? Just go over the ones that students got incorrect. And this is the spot where your prep comes into play, right? Definitely be prepared. Right? A student's asking, hey teacher, why isn't it A? Right? So you have to make sure you know why it's not A, or B, or C. So spend about 10 minutes, and then maybe about 5-6 minutes going over the questions that students had a hard time with. Of course, you're not going to go over every single question. Maybe even if the students missed all 8 questions, you'll have time to go over like 2 or 3. Right? Or if you want to invest more time into this section because students just struggle with reading, but they're very good with listening, that's fine too. And then the discuss section, don't feel pressured to go over every single paragraph, of course. It's not going to happen. I would just choose a few paragraphs that you thought were really interesting, maybe like with this Disney stuff, and then show them a video and discuss or something like that. But the discuss section is important, I feel, but it's not the focus of C1. Discussion is more focused on like B1 or C2. So don't feel pressured to cover this in depth. It's actually a minor component. Like you have to finish it. Okay, so after you finish this reading, you're gonna move on to the listening. And before I go to the listening, are there any last questions for the reading? Reading is gonna be, I think, the toughest one in this section. But once your students get more used to the format, it gets a lot easier. I think about midway throughout the term. Okay, moving on to the listening. Okay, so this is the last hour. You should definitely be starting the last hour with the listening, right? Or even before the last hour, so that you guys can actually finish. You're not going to have that much time for speaking and writing, but it doesn't really take that long. So 10-15 minutes, I usually spend. You're supposed to spend, I think, 20-30 minutes, but I spend like 10-15 minutes on that. So listening, if you taught C1 and C2, there's a lot of guidance, right? But if you look at C1 high, there's no guidance at all. It's nice. This is actually more like 2.0 listening style, where they just listen to it and just take notes, which is nice. Some people like to just give paper to their students and just have them take notes on that, especially because, has anyone taken the TOEFL IBT test, TOEFL test? If you haven't, it's okay. They just take notes on a piece of paper. They don't ever type when they're taking that test. So it's good practice for that as well. And another thing is, if you're worried about your page being blank, the students can actually take a picture of their notes, and then I think there's like an import image function now, and then you can import the picture of their notes onto here, so it's not. So that's one good way to do it. Another thing you should have prepared maybe is your own model notes, so that after you go over, after the students do it, you can show them your model notes. Maybe they can write in things that they might have missed. So that's a good idea. Or you can just have the students just write on here. That's fine too. There's plenty of space. Some students are really, really good with their handwriting. Mine is horrible, but I've seen some students with like outstanding handwriting from this section, so that's fine too. Just, I guess, try out different ways, see what works for you. So yeah, you just play it straight through. Right? Just play this audio track. It's like 4 minutes long, 3.5 minutes. You just play it straight through and let them take notes. You should definitely have your own notes prepared. I go over the notes with the students after they've done their notes.
When I looked at the training thing online last night, it
Yes.
said you should give them a little more time than the listening, just to finish the notes and stuff.
That's up to you. I found that like when I actually taught the class, students usually don't write past the 3, like after it's done.
Yeah.
I feel like most students will either sit there because they're discouraged or they're done. You can if you need to.
So do they only get to listen to it one time?
Yes, but also that's up to you. Like, if your students are really struggling, then you can do it 2 times. Remember, nothing's set in stone. It's like, you shouldn't feel pressured to like just do things a certain way just because it's here.
Right.
Right? You're just trying to meet this objective, and the objective is make sure the students understand the connections between the thesis and main ideas, and then make sure they have good note-taking skills and know what the passage is about. Right? If it takes maybe if you need to take more time here and play it 2-3 times and to meet this objective, that's there's a lot of things you need to balance, but just try to meet the objective. Oh yeah?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go
Oh, so you said you review the notes with them before they do the scanning
Yeah.
prep?
That's up to you too. I think think you're supposed to do that.
It's not methodology, Scott.
Yeah, it's not methodology.
In some of the other modules, there are pages with note-taking tips.
It does have that. So like if you look at the end, it does have those tips.
Oh, there's no like link on it?
There's no note-taking tips. You are the note-taking tips. It's I think A2 has note-taking tips.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess this
At least my experience from A2, you like if they've passed through this and they made it to C1, most of the time they'll either like write their notes for like a minute and a half and stop because they've got the main idea of the listening. And you probably shouldn't have to play it 2 or 3 more times because they'll get the main idea and the gist of it.
Okay. So the difference here is that a lot of the questions aren't based on the main idea. Like the first one is, but then the rest of them, yeah, they're gonna be like major or minor details.
Yeah.
But I mean, if they can get the main idea and then understand the lesson for the day, like purpose and tone, they can get a pretty good score, except they usually get these tone questions wrong because they don't really know. Hopeful, dismissive, aggressive, satisfied, it's pretty tough. That's why I think it is a good idea to go over the notes with the students, to kind of not spoon feed them the answers, but try to guide them to the correct answers on the page. So like Jane said, you're not supposed to go over the notes with the students. That's not methodology. But I feel like one of the most important parts of listening is note-taking. I like to stress like good note-taking skills. So if you can build that up for 13 weeks with the students, I think that's really that's rewarding to see the students taking good notes by the end of the 13 weeks. And it's going to help them a lot. And it is the objective. You're supposed to help them note-take. But again, this way, I've seen a lot of people do this through different CCTVs, but I've seen people do this in so many different ways. Right? Just try to make them memorable. So again, after you've done the notes, maybe you've gone over the notes with the students, then you do the scanning questions. Same thing. Of course, for the both scanning sections, reading and listening, the students can use dual screen, that's fine. They don't have to memorize the notes. And then go over the questions that a lot of students got wrong.
Are the questions, the scanning questions, the answers to them, are they paraphrased from what you hear in the audio? Is that why it's so
Yeah, a little bit. They're not exactly the same. And that's how it is in the IBT test too, the TOEFL test. It's usually not exactly the same. Right. So after you do the scanning section here, there is a little bit of time to discuss. Right? You might not have time to discuss, you might have time to discuss too. But this one looks a little bit different, but it says discuss the thesis and main idea, the lecture, and think about how they relate to the article. Right? So here you can kind of prepare media cards as well and your own examples to discuss the topics that we just heard about, that they heard about. Write down the thesis and main idea. Actually, this is again a minor component, right? You're not trying to, this is not a discussion class. But of course, you might want to do the discussion here and make it kind of fun because the students are going to be pretty burnt out at this stage. They did the hour of skills, hour of reading, plus an hour of listening here. It's going to be pretty tough. What's the home stretch? So after they do the discussion, they're either going to do reading or writing. So this one takes like 10-15 minutes to do, and it's very, very straightforward. I'm actually not going to spend too much time on this section, but the reading or speaking is very, very, very straightforward. So just make sure when they're doing the reading or speaking, they can just support their arguments.
Writing or speaking?
Sorry, writing or speaking. They can do their arguments like, they can support the arguments logically. Make sure they don't use circular reasoning. Tell them, hey, if I read your writing or if I listen to your speaking, I don't want to ask like why. I want you to explain to me why you said that. I think that's the most important. So as long as they can formulate an opinion and logically support that opinion with their reasons, that's fine. So after they go through like brainstorm and then come up with an outline and actually write one paragraph, this usually doesn't take long, it's like a minute or two because they already have an outline. You can have like one or two students share and go over that class. Right? Same thing with the speaking. You can have one or two people share. The students are actually going to record. There's like a record button here for speaking, and then they submit, and then you can actually play it straight from the TV. So you can share like one or two. You're not going to have time to share all of them. Also for the speaking, you're going to have this evaluate button. Don't worry about that. If you want to use it, you can. You don't have to because you can't evaluate every single student anyway. So if you want to give students grade for their speaking, that's okay too. You don't have to use that. You can kind of tell speaking and writing is it is important, but you're not going to have a lot of time to do speaking and writing most classes. we should definitely go over basic speaking skills.
So between the prime and the practice, is it more important to do the prime,
For speaking?
speaking and writing?
Yeah. I would say for the first few weeks, it's very important because it keeps repeating, right? But then in the later weeks, I would say it's more important to actually practice and get the feedback. Before I go over like their homework, any questions on those 3 hours?
How much time would you give them for the listening questions?
Listening questions? Same thing. Actually, listening takes a lot less time than reading questions, but I find that usually later on in the term they finish in like 5-6 minutes. But at the very beginning, maybe give them 10 minutes. And then it's gonna take, because especially if you go over the notes with them, it doesn't take too much time. 10 minutes at the beginning, maybe like 5-6 minutes. It doesn't take too much.
You don't play the listening questions, they just read them?
Yeah, they just read them.
And the audios are not accessible on student tablets during class time, so they can't do it individually?
It is. What do you mean, the audio for the?
For like when they take notes, the audio button?
It is.
Oh, it's
So for the take note section, the students are actually supposed to put their earbuds in and listen to it themselves. That's
Oh,
why
it's
they have that extra
individual
time.
work?
it's supposed to be,
It's
but
supposed to be.
I feel like if they
no
do it
one
that
does
way,
it.
they're gonna dwell in like the first minute, like we
Yeah.
want them every.
No one does it individually, and I wouldn't recommend it because later on when they do the level up test, they don't listen to it multiple times. Right? They have to listen to it straight through. And it's kind of just kind of handicapping them for the actual level up test. It's kind of like treating them like a baby, and then they're gonna get flustered when they have to take the actual level up test. So I wouldn't recommend doing it. Especially because like C1, C2 mid, and C1, C2 mid they do it individually, which is kind of like the practice for the numbers. So definitely, I feel like it's a lot more.
This is more of like a technical question,
Yeah.
but after they've submitted their scanning answers and when you're reviewing them, you know how they can change their answers to
Yes.
the correct answer? Is there a way that you could prevent that?
No, I think starting from week 1, just set like really good procedures and routines. So I mean, right after they finish the quiz, I just walk the students, and then I just make sure to tell them, hey, just have good student management. Say, I don't want you to change scores until we're all done and reviewing them. And usually, I haven't had a huge problem with it, as long as you're proctoring and everything. I think sometimes students open up S notes and then write down their answers, so that they can write down their scores themselves. Or you can just like have a piece of paper and then write down their scores every week if you want to keep track. That's just like a student management issue. So make sure they're not changing their answers. So honestly, like for 2.02 when they had paper books, they could take an eraser and change it. It's just easier. Anything else? Alright, this is something that you don't really have to worry about, but it's something that you should know, right? So this is something that we just talked about for the 3 hours. That's what they do in class. And then learning cycle is just what their homework is. So they have e-learning, which is called extended learning. So this is one part of their homework, where they go home and they answer more questions about the reading and listening. And then they also have I-learning, where they practice their vocab chunks, and then they either do speaking or writing. You guys don't have to grade those. You guys all have that in your packets. And then the last thing that you have to do after each class is just give a contribution grade. There's no other grades. It's like how well did they participate in class. That's actually it for C1I.
If you were like to compare C1 mid to high, like in terms of objectives, what would you say is the difference?
The biggest difference would be the skills. The skills are definitely a little bit harder for the students in the first hour. but the rest of the class is similar. Let's take a like 5-minute break, and then we'll start with C2.